Welcome back to the Seattle Emeralds MyNBA series, everybody. We are at the trade deadline, sitting at 13 and 38 on the season. Good enough to put us in dead last in the Western Conference. But hey, we are making some ground on the Sacramento Kings. I mean, just 10 games ago, we had 6 wins, 7 wins, something like that. And we've actually won 5 of the last 10, it looks like. Let's see what we are in the last 10. Yeah, 5-5 in our last 10 games. So, as bad as it is to say, we're playing better than we have the entire season. The Kings' D'Angelo Russell experiment has not worked out for them. They still have Sabonis. They drafted Dylan Harper, who, don't get me wrong, after being picked number 2 overall, is having a good year with 14 points per game, shooting 41% from the field, but very, very much struggling from the three-point line. The Kings have a solid roster. You know, they traded De'Aaron Fox to the Rockets. They got Cam Whitmore. They got a pick. They got picks brought in. They got a few other pieces as well. They just can't put it together. It's surprising to see them this low. The Jazz, a team that we just beat, they have a solid roster, but they're just not really good enough to compete yet. And as you can see, here is where everybody else stands, with the Nuggets, the Thunder, and the Timberwolves all competing for the #1 seed in the Western Conference. As far as the Eastern Conference side of things, we've really got a tight race. You've got the Celtics, 76ers, Hornets, Pacers, and Cavs all really right together. I mean, the Cavs are the 5 seed, and they're only 3 games back. After that, you have a little bit more of a gap with the Magic sitting at 4.5 games back with 26 wins. This Magic team, though, has all the potential in the world. The Bucks, without a center, after losing Brook Lopez to the expansion draft, they're pretty solid still. I mean, they're not great. Somehow they got Toumani Camara, who is, you know, a really, really good prospect for them. I think he fits really well next to Giannis and Damian Lillard. Somehow they brought him in. Toronto is sitting there at the 8 seed. Then down at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, we've got the Bullets with 17 wins. We've got the Wizards with 17 wins. And the Pistons with a measly 18 wins, despite bringing in Bradley Beal, having a solid core. They brought in Trey Mann. They have Marcus Sasser. I mean, this team should be good, in my opinion. Ron Hall and Larry Nance Jr., they're just missing that big center play, in my opinion. Jalen Duren's good, but they don't have like a dominant offensive center. It doesn't help that Asar Thompson is injured after playing about, 26 minutes per game, but he hasn't really been healthy this season. He's played, missed about 12 games this year for the Pistons. So that's 12 games that he could have been in there for. And with the trade deadline, not rapidly approaching, I was about to say, with the trade deadline here, we've already had a good amount of trades. You guys saw last episode, Max Strus being sent to Charlotte. In return, the Cavs are going to get DeAnthony Melton as a backup point guard. The Thunder and the Pistons swap Nick Clifford and second-round picks, as well as Luka Garza going to Detroit. The Clippers trade for Terrence Mann back from Miami and a second-round pick for Duncan Robinson. The Bulls trade for Kai Jones. In return, the Celtics get a first and a second. Onyeka Okongwu and DeLon Wright go to the Los Angeles Lakers, where they send out Rui Hachimura and a first-round pick. That was the last of the very big trades that we've seen outside of earlier in the year. In December, the Lakers making a trade for DeAndre Hunter by sending out Max Christie and Dorian Finney-Smith. Obviously, trades are on everyone's mind right now with the crazy Luka Doncic trade. Fortunately for this reality, that trade is not happening. The Mavericks, Mavericks fans, you can breathe steady. Luka Doncic is still your star in this reality. He is not going anywhere. You've got Luka, you've got Kyrie, you've got a solid core, and the Mavericks are actually about to make a trade in this reality, but not trade away Luka Doncic. Now, when you look at the roster, they've got a pretty solid, fairly well-built roster, at least as far as NBA 2K goes. I mean, you've got Luka, Kyrie Irving, but then you have Klay Thompson, who, while he's playing well, he's just, he's shooting really well from 3. Don't get me wrong, on about 6.5 attempts, he's almost shooting 40%. That's very solid for such a high volume. He's averaging 13 points. He's averaging 2.5 assists, 3 rebounds. But I believe that the Mavericks can and do want to improve off of Klay Thompson. They're going to be moving on from Klay Thompson. Down at the bottom of their bench as well, they have Dario Saric somewhere. They should. I believe that the Mavericks do want to upgrade from Klay Thompson, and they're going to do that by getting rid of Daniel Gafford, Klay Thompson, Maxi Kleber, and Kessler Edwards. In return, they're going to send or receive Chris Middleton, who, mind you, yes, he's playing on an expansion team, is having a season. 25 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, or 8.8 rebounds, 6.5 assists, almost 2 steals, shooting almost 40% from the field and 31% from 3. They're going to bring in Chris Middleton. They're going to bring in Bogdan Bogdanovic, another solid player. And they're also going to bring in Dario Saric. And the Mavericks are going to give up a second-round pick in 2030. Now, you might be thinking this is a lot to give up for this haul, as we're going to do like a swap. The Bullets are going to throw in their second-round pick this year just to make it a little bit more even. But look at this trade correctly. You know, Daniel Gafford, don't get me wrong, brings something different to the table than Derek Lively. But the Mavericks are sitting at the, you know, on the bubble. They're not a finals contending team despite going last year, and they're trying to get over the hump. They want to get some veteran presence around Luka and around Kyrie and bring in guys that can score. Why not replace a 13-point-per-game scorer with Chris Middleton, who's averaging 25? Now, obviously, we know Chris Middleton's not going to come in and average 25 with Luka and Kyrie around him, but he's going to come in and he's going to do better than Klay Thompson. At minimum, the exact same. Yes, you're giving up Daniel Gafford, but you have Derek Lively, who I think fits the role better. Yes, you're giving up Maxi Kleber, who is on an expiring contract. You're giving up Kessler Edwards just as a bit of a young piece to give the Bullets a reason to take this trade. The Bullets, if you're looking on their side of this story, they're getting rid of Chris Middleton, who has an expiring contract. You're getting rid of Bogdan, who's an expiring contract. You're getting rid of Saric, who's an expiring contract. You're getting Klay Thompson, who's on a 2-year deal, so you've got some money on the books if you want to make a move next year. You've got Daniel Gafford, who you can decide to re-sign or not. Kleber's expiring. Kessler Edwards is expiring, and you get a second-round pick down the road, which, yeah, we're actually going to remove that. So they get a young option, second-round pick, a good center who could be re-signed to be your future center the next few years. Klay Thompson, who is just there to, you know, soak up the salary, and Maxi Kleber, who's an expiring contract as well. The Mavericks, I think, really do good with this trade. And for some reason, Kessler Edwards has a no-trade clause. I am about to go fix that because there's no way Kessler Edwards should have that. So now that I removed Kessler Edwards' no-trade clause, which he should have never had, this trade goes through. And now we get a look at what the Dallas Mavericks are going to look like here after this trade deadline. There's no way they're starting Jaden Hardy over Kyrie Irving. I mean, what are we doing, folks? I guess we're going to run Kyrie at the 1 and Luka at the 2. I know this hurts to see, Mavs fans. You've got Kyrie, you've got Luka, you've got Chris Middleton, PJ Washington, and Derek Lively. And still off the bench, he managed to have Jaden Hardy, Taurean Prince, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Najee Marshall, Dario Saric, their rookie they drafted this year, Ulrich Shamshay, Dwight Powell, Aizen Almansa out of Spain, the second-round pick from this last year. So, man, Mavericks sitting at 28 and 22. I think they got better off of that trade, if we're being honest. I mean, obviously, it's not going to, you know, instantly work out. You're just going to have to, you know, get the players to play together, get them a little bit more familiar with each other. And if you're the Bullets, you bring in Klay Thompson to, you know, take up some money, but you get a worse roster, why are they running a 5-man roster? What in the world is this team doing right now? That's crazy. Yeah, there we go. Tyus Jones, VJ Edgecombe, Klay Thompson, Grant Williams, and Gafford. If you're the Bullets now, you're not worried about Chris Middleton winning you as many games. You're not worried about losing a high draft pick. And I think, honestly, that is probably the biggest worry for an expansion team here in year one, especially for the Austin Bullets, who already are sitting at the 15th seed in the Eastern Conference. So they're one back from, they're tied with the Wizards, who are the 16th seed. But we are now going to see a trade for a team that is on the brink. I mean, you know, last trade, the Mavericks were 6th seed. You know, they wanted to get something going to make them, you know, move the needle. The Bulls perennial 9 through 11 seed, it seems like, maybe even 12 seed. It's time for, much like in real life, Chicago to move on from Zach LaVine. Now, obviously, I know Bulls fans really like Zach LaVine, but if we're being honest, it is time for him to move on. They did it in real life, and they're going to do it here in this reality. Now, in order to make the contracts match up with Memphis, who is looking to bring in another scorer alongside Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, they have to get back Marcus Smart, who's on a one-year deal, and Rashawn Holmes, who is on a one-year deal as well. They're also going to get Jonas Valanciunas and a first-round pick in 2027, which is going to be top 5 protected. And they're also going to get a first-round pick in 2030 unprotected. Now, looking at this trade, Chicago sits at the 11 seed, you know, finally moving on from Zach LaVine. They get to go into a rebuild. They take on expiring deals in Marcus Smart, Rashawn Holmes. They bring in Valanciunas to be a veteran presence for a couple of years, maybe move on from him next year. And then you get 2 first-round picks in return for Zach LaVine. Memphis side of the story, you're sitting at the 9 seed, so you're kind of in that no man's land as well that Zach LaVine and the Bulls have been in for some time. The Marcus Smart experiment has not worked out. I mean, 14 in year 1, 10 last year, and now he's all the way down to 8.5 points per game, shooting 25% from 3. I mean, that's abysmal. So you get rid of Marcus Smart. You get rid of a bad contract in Rashawn Holmes. You get rid of Valanciunas when you have Zach Edey, who can play, as well as Jaren Jackson Jr., who can play the power forward or center. So you spread, you know, get rid of the traffic jam you have at center for the moment. And you bring in Zach LaVine to play the small forward position or the shooting guard position. This team instantly just looks very, very scary. Now, if you're Chicago, obviously this is a move that gets you to rebuild. You get Matas Buzelis some more playing time, Patrick Williams some more playing time. Maybe down the road we move on from Vucevic. This team gets what they want. They get into a rebuilding stage, and if you're the Maverick or the Grizzlies, you get to bring in a top scoring option in the NBA who, in my opinion, is definitely going to play shooting guard if one of them goes down. We're going to go Desmond Bane at shooting guard just because he is still the higher overall there at shooting guard. So this is the new look Grizzlies lineup. They have Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Zach LaVine, Santi Aldama, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Off the bench are going to have Zach Edey, Scottie Pippen Jr., G.G. Jackson, Vince Williams Jr., who goes from starting to a 9th man, Jake LaRavia, and Kevin McCullough Jr., as well as Jalen Wells, who I know they like. They brought in Antonio Reeves in that trade as well. That Grizzlies team has a lot of talent and a lot of potential, in my opinion, to make a big splash here in the upcoming playoffs. The next trade we're having here at the deadline, it's going to be the Miami Heat again. But this time around, they sit at the 10 seed, and as Miami always does, they don't want to rebuild. They want to compete. They gave away Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors last year. This core has not been able to make that jump that they were hoping they would be able to make. So we are seeing a big trade here between two conferences. You've got the 2030 first-round pick from Miami, Nikola Jovic, a young budding player in the NBA, Terrence Mann, a veteran on a 3-year deal, and Andrew Wiggins, who they received as a filler option for the trade a year ago that sent Jimmy Butler to Golden State. In return, the Clippers are going to send them Kawhi Leonard and Derrick Jones Jr. Wow, what a trade here in Season 1 of our Seattle Emeralds Dynasty. This trade deadline package is going crazy. Look at it this way, though. The Clippers are the 13th seed. They've tried to make the James Harden Kawhi Leonard experiment work. This trade just finally says, whatever, let's get it over with. We're getting rid of Kawhi. We're getting rid of Derrick Jones Jr., who, don't get me wrong, is a good player, but if you're rebuilding, you don't necessarily need him. In return, you get filler in Andrew Wiggins. You get filler in Terrence Mann, but he's a fan favorite, so you bring him back after half a year in Miami. Then you bring in Nikola Jovic, who is really the big piece in this trade. 22 years old, having an okay year for the Heat. Not shooting it the greatest, but maybe he can get better in a bigger role. And you get a first-round pick. For Miami, you sit at the 10 seed. Now you bring in a solidified star to play alongside Tyler Hero, Bam, and Jonathan Kuminga. Maybe this is enough to get Miami into the playoffs. We'll see how this goes for the Heat as we continue through the season. Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero, Kawhi, Jonathan Kuminga, and Bam Adebayo off the bench. You still manage to keep Jaime Jaquez Jr., Igor Demon, who is having a great year for a rookie, averaging 15 points per game. That was the number 3 overall pick for the Miami Heat. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Derrick Jones Jr., Haywood Highsmith, and Kel'el Ware down at the bottom of the bench, who don't even get me started how he is at the very bottom of the bench, as well as Jericho Simmons and Kevin Love to round out this roster. This trade is crazy for Miami. The Heat are right back in NBA Finals contention, in my opinion. The Clippers get rid of Kawhi finally. They've still got, some veterans that they're not going to be able to move off the books this season just due to the way contracts work. But they're in a better position to rebuild now, in my opinion. And we're actually, for our final trade here at the trade deadline now, I know in the NBA there's usually a lot more trades than this with small players, but it's just hard with contracts and how they work and, how twisted they can get in NBA 2K to actually make moves. But final trade, we're going back to Chicago. They're going to be giving up Vucevic, which makes sense because they were, going into the rebuild. They're going to be giving up Vucevic in return. They're not going to be getting much because Vuce is well out of his prime. They're going to get Harrison Barnes to match the salary, I should say. And they're also going to get the Hornets first-round pick in 2026 and a 2026 second, which comes from Utah. So the Spurs get a backup center to play behind Victor Wembanyama because right now they don't have anybody. Christian Koloko is there on a two-way contract. Their next best is Zach Collins or Jeremy Sohan. So they bring in Vooch as a veteran presence, and, they're the 5 seed right now, so this is going to help them for their playoff run upcoming. If you're Chicago, you get rid of Vooch finally. You get Harrison Barnes on an expiring deal, but you get a first and a second in return for it, and that is going to be the final move from this 2025 NBA trade deadline. If we look at the Chicago Bulls, their lineup looks very different. Valanciunas does get to start here for the Bulls, at least for the rest of this season. Maybe they'll move on from him in the offseason. If you're the Spurs, this trade makes you a lot happier with how your team is constructed. You've got Wemby there. He's going to play defense. He's not really going to need a center beside him. So you bring in Vooch to be that backup big man that you've been missing. Zach Collins doesn't exactly meet that criteria. And don't get me wrong, Vooch is having a solid year. He's not shooting it well, but I'm sure that will change in a lesser role. And now the Spurs do look really dangerous. You've got Chris Paul still. You've got Stephon Castle still. You brought in Cooper Flagg with the #1 overall pick last year. You've got Jeremy Sohan. You've got Wemby. Devin Vassell is still there. Keldon Johnson and now Vooch. I mean, this roster could make a lot of noise here as we go past the trade deadline into February further than we are right now. But I know you guys are thinking, what about our trades? What about the Emeralds trades that I talked about last time? And I do have a few trades that I'm going to do. Nothing crazy, we're just in year one. I'm not really looking to bring in, go out there and trade for a star, go out there and trade for, hey, we're going to go out there and trade for Giannis Antetokounmpo here in year one. No, I'm not really looking for that. We're going to make a few small moves that I think makes sense for us. I don't really like what Jamal Shead has brought to this team. So we're going to move on from him. We're going to send him to Sacramento for Doug McDermott and a second-round pick, which they do not accept, even though if I go to the trade finder, I'm fairly certain they're actually going to accept that trade because they directly offered me that trade, if I recall correctly, and now they are not interested. So that makes a lot of sense, but we're going to make it work. We're going to find a trade with the Kings that makes sense. Maybe we get a second-round pick next year in return for Jamal Shead as well. Where did Doug McDermott go? Well, actually, I'm going to go with not Doug McDermott. I'm going to go with a guy that's probably even less valuable to them. I mean, don't get me wrong, Doug McDermott is not valuable with them at all, but I'm going to go with PJ Tucker. They're not interested, so maybe we can get a later second-round pick, maybe like 2027. There we go. We move on from Jamal Shead, he wasn't really playing anyways. No way we're moving Ace Bailey to the bench after the start he's had this year. Don't get me wrong, Malik Monk is good. Ace Bailey is just the star of the show right now. But Malik Monk had really taken over that backup point guard role, so I'm not super mad at losing Jamal Sheed. Obviously, you know, we don't have a fully, you know, we don't have a backup point guard, but Malik Monk is there in option if we need him as a backup point guard. He's not going to be playing a lot of minutes there. And now, as sad of a moment as it is, we are going to be moving on from Brook Lopez. He's had a good year for us, 9.8 points per game. But I think it's time for him to go to a veteran for the last half of this year. This could be his final season in the NBA. Don't get me wrong, he has another year under contract, but he'll be 38 next year. And I just don't know if he's going to have enough left in the tank to play another season. So let's send him to a contender. Let's give him a role that makes sense for him to play as a veteran on the bench of a contending team. In my opinion, that's the best thing we can do for a veteran like Brook Lopez on a team like the Emeralds. So the initial trade that I'm trying to do is going to send Brook Lopez to Minnesota. Now, you may be thinking they have Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert. Naz Reid is out for about 4 to 6 weeks. So, yes, he's going to be back before the playoffs, but they need a backup center right now. They could use a shooter at the backup center position. And, you know, you can even move Naz Reid over to the power forward position if you're, you know, feeling a little bit more organized. And they don't really need Mike Conley anymore. You've got Rob Dillingham. You've got Malcolm Brogdon. You've got Delano Banton, who's a solid option as a third point guard. They don't need Mike Conley. We just got rid of Jamal Sheed, and obviously we don't want to start Mike Conley, so he'll just come here, play half a season, probably retire. But they have a counteroffer. We're going to move on from Brook Lopez in a 2028 second. In return, we're going to get Mike Conley in the Minnesota first-round pick this upcoming season, unprotected, as we now will shift Goga Badatse into the starting lineup. We're not starting Mike Conley or Malik Monk. Malik Monk is just better off the bench. Mike Conley himself is not willing, you know, we're not willing to start him. He's going to be like a 16-minute-a-game player. Let's get Isaiah Collier some more minutes. Yeah, that looks a lot better in my opinion. Goga, that's a lot of minutes for you, but I'm going to give him back to Ace Bailey as well as we move on from Ace Bailey in the final, or as we move on from Brook Lopez. It's a sad time because, you know, he's a really solid option. But the final guy we're going to move on from, haven't quite decided who I like more just yet. Simon Fontecchio is on $8.5 million, and Georges Niang is on $8.5 million pretty much. They both play a similar role, but I think I like Simon Fontecchio a little bit more. So we're going to move on from Georges Niang. We're actually going to send him in the trade finder. I don't really care what we get too much in return. Like, do we send him back to Cleveland? That makes a little bit of sense because looking at their power forward position, they could use a backup power forward that can shoot. They don't have... Kenrich Williams is not a bad shooter, but he's not the shooter that Georges Niang is. Niang knows a lot of the Cavs players. He's got good chemistry with him, or with those players. That's where we are going to move on from Georges Niang. That's going to leave us with about 17 minutes to go. We're going to give a couple extra minutes to the rest of the guys that are already playing. Mike Conley can get up to 18. Fontecchio up to 20. Malik Monk to 28 off the bench. Badatse will get 25. Jalen Williams will get 25. Kisper with 27. Bailey with 31. And Isaiah Collier with 27 as well. And we're going to give City Sissoko a chance to play. He's going to get about 8 minutes a night, as that is your new Seattle Emeralds lineup. This team not really been good this year, so I was fine getting rid of some veteran pieces. Maybe, you know, in the offseason we can make a bigger move, but we're looking forward to the NBA draft as we get a little bit farther closer, or a little bit closer to this NBA season ending. 13-38 right now. We're about to sim past the trade deadline, so next time you see this series, we will be probably into March at minimum. I'm going to go past the All-Star break, I imagine, as we need to start wrapping up year one and get into the offseason, see if we can turn this boat around in year two. Thank you all for watching this one, though. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you all next time.
Sounds right.